What up, YouTube? I got another video for you today, and I've never done a video like this, and I really haven't seen one out like this. And basically, one of the things I go through, probably half the time when I purchase knives, especially on the sub $80 range, $50 range, or even sometimes in the higher price range, is the initial break-in time of a knife, or little problems that you may see because these knives are inexpensive. So you'll see some imperfections, not imperfections, but as far as fit and finish, as far as the blade not being centered and all that stuff. And it's no reason to kind of discard the knife or waste time sending it back on most cases as far as getting a knife that's centered. There's stuff you can do when you get the knife that you can go ahead and tinker with it and get it to go. Sometimes there's a real simple fix for it. And once you figure these things out, I would say let's say if you ordered like 10 knives, sub $50 knives, I would say 65 to 70% of the time you're going to have a blade that's not centered. It's not going to be as smooth or as the ideal running, or the deployment's not going to be ideal. And a lot of these things can be taken care of by just a couple little things, instead of having to wait all that break in time. And I'm going to try to see if I can't go over a couple things here with you. And once you learn a couple of these things, especially if you're new, most of you guys probably know this already because you've had knives for a while and you've tinkered with them. And but this is just pretty much for guys that are either getting into it or really would rather, you know, they just don't know because they get a knife, they use it, they don't really go into opening it up or anything like that. And this will help you out, I hope, anyway. So in front of me and in front of you guys, we have a couple Kershaws. Now this is the 2014 special edition Christmas package or whatever. I got this as a gift. I wouldn't have bought these knives because I don't buy from a place that has these for sale. So I got it as a gift, and that's pretty much why I have them in front of me. So anyway, these two knives, this is the Freefall right here and the Swerve. And I've already seen a couple reviews on these 2014 package. It comes with these two knives. It also comes with this flashlight, which is pretty good. It's a very attractive package. It's very inexpensive. And it's definitely worth the money. But like I said, if they sold it anywhere else, I'd be all over it. So not a bad package. But one of the things I did see is when people initially got them open and they went to hit the flipper, they'd have this deal here where it's just not deploying like it should. There's a couple reasons that cause this. Maybe the pivot is too tight, or because this is a black coated blade, depending on their coating, if they use a not so expensive coating, the coating actually on a smaller scale or a microscopic scale, I guess for use of a better term, it's a little bit more porous than some of the better coatings on there. Like you can get a ZT that's coated and it'll fly out like forget about it, no problems. But some of these other coatings are a little bit more porous, so the actual detent ball that's located on the inside of the knife has a little bit more friction to deal with. And third is that they haven't been lubricated. And there's one other thing too, is a lot of your lower end knives, instead of having bronze phosphorus washers, they go ahead with these nylon washers in there. There's a couple reasons. First off, it's cost effective. It's cheaper for them to buy those than the bronze phosphorus washer. And number two, during assembly, it allows more room for adjustment so the blade's aligned. There's one of the issues why your knife, when you get it, may not be centered, because when they tighten up on these nylons, that's how they figure out how they're centered. So if it's too tight, you're going to get deployment like this. The normal fix would usually be to go ahead and play with this pivot screw, loosen it up. But what you'll find in most instances is when you don't go to loosen it up, that the blade is no longer centered. Now sometimes you're lucky. Usually if you have a blade that is if it's off-centered to the right, usually tightening the pivot will cause the blade to go that way and you can get it centered. But when you tighten that pivot, because of these nylon washers, the deployment, you're going to have more wrist action to get that knife open. And ideally that's not what you want. You want to be able to flick it boom, and get done with it, and just have it open. If you're lucky, the blade is actually off-center to the left, which means if you go ahead and loosen the pivot, then the blade will cruise back center, and the deployment should be awesome. It should loosen up quite a bit and actually fly open. The only bad thing with that is if you have to loosen it too much, then there could be a chance where you'll develop lock rock, or it'll be up and down play on that. So there's kind of like, it's cool that if you can get it to go, then you're perfect and no big deals. But sometimes if you loosen it so much to get it centered, then there'll be lock rock in there, because just the way something's going on in there. And usually when they mass produce these knives, it's that this wasn't centered on their jig when they went to drill the pivot hole through their scales or through the line, or something is off that's causing that pivot to kink one way or another, up or down. So a lot of times you'll get these knives and they'll be off. I've done a handful, I've done a bunch of scale jobs on knives where I got it and it was off-centered. As soon as I went ahead and put scales on it, it's centered right up, it locked perfect and everything. It's just because when I go ahead and when I drilled my pivot, I made sure, and I did all the little necessary things to make sure and to ensure that that pivot is in there perfectly straight and square to the scale, to the liners and to the scale. And that helps fix the problem. So that's the things also. One last thing too, that when you have a knife that has a pocket clip that can be moved left or right, tip up or tip down carry, usually when you get them, it'll be, or sometimes when you get them when it's a tip down and they have it on the pocket clip on a tip down configuration, when they fasten that pocket clip to the holes that are mounted around the pivot, sometimes the fasteners that actually hold through go a little bit past the liner, or put pressure on this liner, which causes the pivot to go off a little bit. So I've noticed it a lot on Spyderco Tenaciouses and that Tenacious line, and I'd get it and it was like, well, it's off center, that sucks. But when I switched the pocket clip to how I want it, which is usually tip up, on the other side, as soon as I back those screws out and put it in there, the blade's perfectly center. It works a lot better. So that's another thing to look out for too. So don't throw it in an envelope and send it off to the company to go get a warranty work done. Just do a couple of those things. So, all right, I showed you this. Not the ideal situation. Now I'm hoping when I go through this, by the time I'm done, this will fly out like it needs to. I've already done this to the Swerve. If you've seen the videos, the Swerve operated just like this did. But what I did, as you can see, now it operates perfectly smooth. This knife has been in my hands literally for about 15-20 minutes. I just busted it out the package, played with it, so it took me about 5 minutes of tinkering around with this to get it from this, which is not so favorable, kind of sucks, to this with no wrist flick. The lockup is actually better than it was, and I'm going to show you how I did that. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and put this off to the side, and we're going to address this issue here. First off, we're going to want to go ahead and do the obvious first. Nothing requiring tools. We're going to see we're going to want to play with this and do a couple tricks before actually having to loosen or adjust in pivots. Because if you can get away with just a couple drops of lube in there and maybe moving the blade back and forth, and it just frees up and starts to work for you, then you're awesome. And because you can see this guy's pretty much centered all the way, so I really don't want to mess with the pivot unless I have to. So we're going to go ahead and lube it up, and basically what I always use is this Tough Glide. I don't know if you can see it because of the okay, here we go. This Tough Glide's great stuff. It dries up nice, so you don't have to worry about lubrication flying out your knife for about 3 or 4 days till it dries up. It's pretty good. I strongly recommend that you hook up with some of this stuff. I've got it here when I'm doing, like say if I'm breaking down a knife and I'm putting it back together, I wipe it down with this tough cloth. And it's just a cloth that's impregnated with the same stuff that's in that lubricant there. So by wiping all that down, it eliminates a step most of the time at the end as far as lubing it. I wipe it down, it's got just enough lubricant on there, it's got protection on the blade, and all the internals are all nice and protected. I've got a nice thin film of lubrication that where it's not needed, it dissipates out. Where it is needed, it hangs out, and it allows things to move freely and things to be protected. They also have a spray that I haven't broken out and used yet, but as you can see, I'm a big fan of this stuff. But usually you can use other lubricants also. They may not work as well as this. After messing around with knives for a few years now, I've noticed that this just seems to work the best for me. So enough of that. Let's go ahead and do this. Basically, what I want to do here is I'll open this guy just about right here. Now, what I want to do with this, you guys, this is probably common sense. I'm going to drop one drop of lube in here, right here with the knife slightly open. And this little needle applicator is awesome because you can just push it in there. Just one drop, man. If it's not gonna, basically one drop should do it fine. If it's not working freely in one drop, then there's another issue that has to be addressed. Another thing also is I will open the knife all the way, and I'll want to put a drop or so on the detent ball, but not much, just a little bit, because sometimes when you get lubrication on the lock face, a knife will become, the lock will become sticky. And usually that's the case when you're dealing with titanium on metal or steel on steel or a frame lock or something like that. Not usually in this circumstance, but it can happen. I figured I should mention it to you. So there we go, we got that. And so now we're going to go ahead and work it back and forth here, you know, let that lubrication get in there. I have an air compressor in my shop, so usually what I'll do is I'll shoot the air compressor in there, some air in there, and it'll just spread that stuff out nice. But I'm just doing exactly how you guys will probably do when you get home. So I'm going to go through now, a little better, not ideal though, still having some issues with it. That's unfortunate. Usually, hopefully you just lube it up and you're ready to go. Another thing to mention is these knives do come, when they're not in this limited edition pack, I know the Swerve is spring assisted, and I believe this may come spring assisted also. I don't think they have a manual version that's outside of this, or besides this one here. So that's probably, if you had a spring assisted, you wouldn't even have to deal with this problem. It'd fly out and you'd be in there. But on the manuals, which I favor more anyway, you're going to want to get this out of there. So I'm sitting there doing it. It's getting there. Sometimes it takes a minute. What you're trying to do is get the initial, any imperfections or any kind of dust that may be in there from packaging, or just create that little trail where the detent ball travels along the blade. Now I said with the coating, it takes a little longer to do if you're breaking it in, and there's more friction when you have a coating on there. So, but I was able to get this one done going through the similar steps that we're doing now with this. Now I did adjust the pivot on that, and that's what I'm going to do next, and we're going to see how it works. Now remember, I said that adjusting this pivot could cause the blade to go left or right, so hopefully we don't run into that situation. So I'm gonna loosen her up just a bit. Alright, it's getting there. There you go. This may require actual break-in time for it to flip open. But as you can see, that's working in there nice now. The blade is still somewhat centered. Let's see. Let me go a little, just a quarter turn wider. There we go, that's more like it. See, now it's starting to, there we go. See, as you can see, things are starting to free up now. Now what you'll want to do is, right now, that last turn I did actually put the blade a little bit off center. Now what will end up happening is you'll go ahead and break it in, or you'll be flipping it open and closed a bunch now. It'll get to the point where it just flies open, and it may even look a little bit more off center. Now when that's the case, you go back in and tighten it up a little bit, because now these the nylon washers in there have kind of broken in, and you can get away with tightening a little bit and just gain back some of that blade centering. So this is where it's at right now. I wish it's not nearly as good as the Swerve, unfortunately, but the Swerve has a better detent than this, so that's why. And also with the Swerve, there's more. If you look here, you see where the flipper is right there. I have more. It actually flips out. I have more room to push down on my finger to flip it out, where this one's not so much because of that hump right there. See, it's getting there. So as you go through there, you'll be able to find out that and do those simple things. Oh, there we go. It's getting there. I'm still having to add that little bit of wrist flick, but it's getting there. So I imagine before the end of the day, it'll be nice and it'll be flipping open nice. And I'll probably, by the end of the week of messing with this, I'll probably have to tighten back up on the pivot. But that's a couple things that you guys can do to kind of break in a knife. That way you don't just send it back or whatever. And I thought getting these in today was a perfect opportunity to show you guys these couple things you can do. So adjusting the pivot will help out quite a bit. On some lockbacks, this first stop pin in the back has a lot to do with how it opens and closes quicker also. Basically what happens on a lockback is that the lockback itself teeters, or this is a pivot point for the lockback. So if this is tight, that pivot locks that block bar onto the lock face of the blade, and when you go ahead and deploy it, it's more friction on there. So sometimes loosening that on a lockback will help ease the deployment on that, and I've noticed it a lot with the Spyderco lockbacks. But then again, there's only so much you can do. If it's too loose, then you'll end up with other issues. So it's all about finding that happy little medium there to you know, some of these will require actual break-in time. This already is working better, and I'm into it. Like I said, right now I'm looking at the video. We're about 16 minutes in or so, and I apologize for the length of the video, but I thought this was some pretty useful information for you. But you can get something that's stiff out the box to operate just like that. So as you can see, it still needs a little break-in, but with no wrist flick, just a nice, you know, good firm flick of the flipper, and she's opening up. So I'll be doing a review on each one of these knives here in the future. Probably have them both out today. We'll see what happens. And I figured I'd just run that by you. Another thing before I go ahead and let you guys go is it's always good to get yourself a nice torque set. Ace Hardware has this torque set here, which comes with these guys. It comes with, let me see, 2, 4, 6 of these torques that go from T5, I think, or maybe even smaller than that, all the way to T10, which is pretty good, and that should cover most of your stuff there. I have added stuff along here because of different stuff I come across, so it's always good to get yourself a little kit started. Ace they're 25 bucks for this kit, but the good thing about it is that if any of these round out, I take it right back to Ace and they replace it, no questions asked. And I've already taken this back like 4 times, and it's not because of the lack of quality, it's just because I take apart and put together knives so frequently that the torques get a little worn. I usually take it back before it even causes me an issue, because I don't want to strip out a bolt if I'm working on a friend's knife, or if I got black finish hardware, I don't want to mar it up by having a torque that's not 100%. So as soon as they start to get worn a little bit, I take them back. Like this one right here, you see how you can see that shiny silver? These are about due to, the whole set needs to go back and get and be replaced there. This is probably as far as I'd probably want to get it to go before I go ahead and before I would use it on a knife again. So just a heads up, get yourself a good Torx kit, get yourself some lube, and take some time out when you get these knives to go and break them in. Don't automatically throw them in the mail and send them back. A couple of these little fixes will save you a lot of time, and even with you know, used knives that you get in trades or buy, or you know, they've been used for a while, you can get even better. I mean, a lot of the knives I have that have the nylon washers, I switch them out with bronze phosphorus washers, and they work better than they ever have. So sometimes doing something, if you really like the knife and you can get yourself get your hands on some bronze phosphorus washers, you can swap those out and then have the knife run even better. So just a couple things to throw out there for you guys. So I appreciate you watching. If you have any comments or any suggestions or anything that you do that helps your break-in time on your knives, please post them below. That way if anybody else reads them, it's another little tool that they can go ahead and put in their toolbox to help them out there. And if it's something I've never heard of, I'd like to learn. So please post your comments below. Appreciate all the subscribers. I appreciate you tuning in. You guys take it easy. Peace.